there were actually two high-profile deaths that happened. C.T. Vivian, a civil rights icon, as well as Representative John Lewis, who is another civil rights icon who then transformed his career into establishment politics and became a congressional representative. It was released that he wrote a letter just days before he passed to offer some words of encouragement. One of the things he said that I thought was pretty kind of dope is democracy is not a state, it is an act, and each generation must do its part to help build what we call the beloved community, a nation, a world, society at peace with itself. So in his, passing hours, he, metaphorically passed on the baton in terms of people doing the work. But what do you have to say about John Lewis, his legacy or his impact?
I mean, his legacy is unmatched. His impact is unmatched. The man was, you can't take any of that away from John Lewis and those who came along with him, many of them, but him in particular, because I think he grew his career into politics as well and kept doing things that would affect policy and things like that. So, I mean, you cannot, take that from John Lewis. In fact, people don't realize that not many Black folks are, that lie in state in the rotunda at the U.S. Capitol. He's the second African-American to lie in state at the rotunda, because it's usually left for presidents and people like that. Rosa Parks was the first African-American person, and John Lewis is the second, but I think he's the first politician or something, like first African-American politician, but he's the second person, African-American person. So that's cool. And I think they're having like some days of events, I think this is days, we haven't kept up with so many different things. You have President Obama speaking as we speak. So I watched the bulk of his speech. It's a nice speech. It's a combination of kind of like John Lewis's history, John Lewis's growth, a trajectory, like a chronology of his career trajectory between then and now, and the impact he made. He's listing some things. So when it's over, you guys go back online and check it out. But I love how he's sprinkling over this. I don't know if you want to call it a eulogy. I'm not really that. I don't care about funerals and stuff that much. I don't know what they call it. But he's sprinkling over that. He's taking the time to sprinkle over this captive voice, because all the shows are preempted on all the networks. Everything's preempted, so you have no other choice but to watch, or you got to be on YouTube with your own phone, looking at some content somewhere else. If you're watching traditional television, you have no other choice but to watch this particular event. But so I like how Obama is cleverly baking into his interview, talking about voter suppression, talking about how we need to make sure we keep pushing for certain things, and elections coming up, and talking about COVID, and how in this time of COVID we're still having to march for certain things, which is a shame, and how the president today is not allowing certain things and using military forces against protesters. He's kind of like blending in the then, the now, and the future, meaning like what's happening in November. So I like how he's couching his speech. But I mean, Obama is obviously an orator, so he's a former lawyer. He's still, I guess, a lawyer, but he's not a practicing lawyer. So it's just doing a great job. My disappointment, not in John Lewis, but in all of the individuals like a John Lewis, and I hate to say this on, where they're celebrating his life, is that there is no torch to pass. That's the problem. So when and Obama, as we speak, is talking a lot about voter suppression, and how, the president has taken great lengths to suppress the vote, and how they closed down voting polls, and people are online for hours, and all these things that are going on, not just this election, but it's been happening, Russia interference with the 2016 election and all this other stuff. I feel like all of these years, and I hate to say it again, I'll be kind with the words, the Maxine Waters. I'm only looking at the African Americans, the Blacks, and the people of color, because white people don't have a stake in the claim as much as we do, even though we have allies. I don't know them all, the Clyburns, the Lewises, the Maxine Waters, and to name a couple, but you know who they all are. Many of them have been in Congress, and Cory Booker, Kamala Harris. They've been in Congress and Senate for a while. Excuse me. A lot of them and I noticed this about politicians in general, particularly Black politicians, not just these people on Capitol Hill, but local politicians who are Congress people, or mayors and council people. They tend to, because there's no term limits, they tend to want to be lifers. They get addicted to power, and John Lewis did too. I do not see, unless I'm wrong, please correct me if I'm wrong, if you check this out and you see I'm wrong, I don't see any of those people, including John Lewis, having brought up other John Lewises. And that's what opened the door for many of this stuff to happen. I'm not gonna blame them, because you can't, it's not your fault you have an enemy, but you know you have an enemy. It's your duty to, you know how people say, keep your friends close and your enemies closer? I believe in keeping your friends close and your enemies out there outside the fence, like that play fences. You stay outside that fence. So that's the disappointment. You know, these people are gonna age and die. If you're lucky to age, some people die young. So where are your proteges? There should have been a healthy dose of proteges from the 70s till now. And I'm not saying they're gonna win every election, but you keep those proteges popping and circling, and we would have the Senate now. We wouldn't be desperate. This is what happens when people have addictions to power. I think they all got addicted to power, including John Lewis. So that's
Right.
my only disappointment. I'm not saying they didn't do a good job with passing legislation, but time, you know, they didn't see this time happening. Because honestly, truth be told, all the presidents before now played ball with them. All the presidents, Democratic or otherwise, played ball with each other. That's just one, the Democrats and Republicans is just one, what do you call it? It's just one. We think there's a difference. There's no stark difference. This president was the one that showed you, I don't like none of y'all. You didn't expect this. That's what happens when you are in the catbird seat and you think you are. This president shows, I'm only friends to me. Me, fi, me is his fraternity. Me, fi, me.
And I want to add, I think what you're saying in terms of there wasn't anybody mentored has been a continuing issue in Black leadership, period.
Absolutely.
And the thing is it's not to smear one's legacy, but it is to point out a fact and a truth that is part and parcel of the reasons why, in my opinion, we as Black folk in the United States are not as politically astute, are not, in my opinion, are not using our political and economic power as best as we can, and we're scattered. I read an article that said that when it came out that John Lewis was on his deathbed, there was a frantic search to replace him. It was like, this guy announced last year that he had stage 4 pancreatic cancer.
But the thing is, there should be no frantic search, because he should have been gone long before now.
Exactly. At
Lewis,
the point, yes.
No, forget ill. John Lewis, Pelosi, and everybody in these jobs, since there is no official term limit, you should have been gone. You should not have been a lifer. There should have been other people you brought up to take your place, because it's the thing to do, to carry the torch, and you go on and write your books and you do your speaking circuit or whatever you're going to be doing. But that's the addiction and the greed, the addiction to power that led him to stay there. And of course, to your point, okay, you didn't have anybody before the cancer diagnosis, but even worse, we knew a year ago and you still didn't do it. That goes to show you the arrogance of people.
Right.
You don't blame other people. He could have quit. No one's making anybody not retire.
Right. And this is not just to, like you said, Black politicians. This goes across the gamut. But when you don't have a large body of representation in the congressional office, the representation that you have, they must be healthy, they must be astute, they must be on point. You know, and
that goes for mayors of cities, because some cities do have term limits, but they all don't. Like the city of Newark does not have term limits for mayor. We don't have any term limits for city council and those kinds of things. So a lot of cities don't have term limits for certain things. We don't have term limits for senators and assembly people and Congress and Congress people. So we need those things. So if you don't have official term limits, then give yourself a term limit.
And you know, and the question goes is that how effective was a John Lewis when we're talking about passing legislation that is needed at this point in his life? I'm really interested. I mean, I know that when you're in Congress and the more tenured you are, you sit on committees and you have these decisions. But I'm trying to understand and gauge how effective is that. In particular, you know, when there was a majority Democratic House and Senate, how effective was he or, you know, other people who have tenure in passing laws? But that is something that we really need to reflect on and move away from treating people like in this kind of godlike, the emperor wears no clothes type of.
Right. Well, they're not going to change. You know why they're not going to change? Because we keep voting for them. It's like a child. I don't have children, but I've been a child. You keep letting that child lie to you. You keep giving that child punishments and say, you on punishment for 2 weeks, you can't watch TV. Then you say, okay, after 2 days, you can watch TV. They know that you ain't going to do nothing. They know we're not going to do anything. So they're going to keep doing what they've been doing like children do.